Welcome, welcome, everybody. Welcome, welcome. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Dr. Margarita Machado, and on behalf of the National Association for Bilingual Education, it is my privilege to welcome you to today's webinar, Building the Future, Understanding the Crisis in Early Childhood Education. Thank you to everyone for joining us across the country, educators, school leaders, researchers, policymakers, advocates, community leaders, and families. Your presence today reflects a shared commitment to ensuring that every child has the opportunity to succeed from the very beginning. At NABE, we believe that the future of our nation begins long before a child enters kindergarten. It begins in the earliest years of life. When children develop language, they build relationships, they discover their identities, and establish the foundation that will shape them for the rest of their lives. For bilingual and multilingual learners, these years are even more critical. They are the years when languages are nurtured, cultures are honored, and children learn who they are. And this is something that has to be celebrated, not something to overcome. Families across the United States understand this. Nearly 73% of Latino parents want their children to learn in both languages, in English and in their home language, for example. The demand for bilingual and multilingual education is clear. Yet too many families continue to face barriers of affordability, availability, and proximity to a high quality early childhood program. Today, we're confronting something that is much larger than an early childhood education crisis. We're confronting a crisis of priorities. Somehow, one of the most basic responsibilities of a society, of any society, which is ensuring that our youngest children are safe, cared for, and ready to learn, has become increasingly difficult to achieve. Early childhood education and childcare have become, and they have been caught in policy debates, funding uncertainty, workforce shortages, and fear. When funding is reduced, children lose opportunities, families lose stability, educators leave the profession, communities lose one of the strongest foundations of their economic and social well-being. Childcare, it's not a luxury. And I will repeat that again. Childcare is not a luxury. Early childhood education is not a luxury. It is an essential infrastructure. It allows parents to work, pursue an education, care for their families, and contribute to our economy. Every investment we make in early childhood education pays dividends for every single generation. Every investment that we fail to make is going to cost us all in the future and today. We're also witnessing changes in teacher preparation programs and certification pathways that risk making it even more difficult to recruit and retain outstanding early childhood educators, particularly bilingual educators. At the same time, conversation should continue to grow around national standards for early childhood education. As these conversations move forward, multilingualism, bilingualism, cultural responsiveness, and equity must remain at the central conversation to every single one of the decisions around early childhood education. And we cannot ignore another reality affecting many of our communities. Across the country, immigration enforcement activity has created fear for many families. For some parents, making it very, very difficult to take their children to an early childhood center. And it has become a decision weighed against their certainty. Schools and early childhood centers should never become places of fear. They should be places of safety, belonging, dignity, and hope for every child and every family. If we truly believe that children are our future, then our nations must reflect on that belief. Early childhood education cannot become a collateral damage when priorities shift. It cannot become a casualty of underinvestment or fear. Because when we fail our youngest children, we're failing our future. This is today, this webinar is not simply a conversation. This is an education, it's not simply an education issue. It is an economic, workforce, and civil rights issue. And above all, a moral imperative. Today is more about identifying problems, trying to figure out what are the folks, the speakers that you see here are doing to build solutions and bring about together an understanding and an expertise around how to address this, regardless of the language they speak, where they live, and their circumstances, their families. We all should have an opportunity to thrive, and we should all have access to early childhood education. At NABE, we are committed to that vision, and we are grateful that you're part of this movement in this conversation today. It is now my great, 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 great honor to introduce our wonderful moderator, Montserrat Garibay, a lifelong champion for educational equity and for multilingual learners. Montserrat, thank you so much for your leadership, and thank you for guiding us in today's conversation. And thank you to every one of our speakers today.
Muchísimas gracias, Margarita. It's a pleasure to be here with you all. Thank you for taking the time to be part of this important conversation. Today, we have a wonderful group of panelists that are very, very knowledgeable about the issue that we're going to talk to you today, building the future, understanding the crisis in early childhood education. And so first, we have a shiro of mine, Dr. Becky Palacios, National Board Certified Teacher. She's a recognized leader in early childhood and dual language education for over 50 years of experience. She was the first Latina inducted in the National Teacher Hall of Fame, and I love her. Thank you so much for being here. We also have Dr. Cristina Gonzalez. She's an education leader and an advocate for over 20 years of experience advancing equity for children, families, and multilingual communities. She serves as an implementation and advocacy manager and is an adjunct professor at the Pepperdine University. And then we have Dr. Chantel Meek. She's a professor of practice and the executive director of Children's Equity Project at Arizona State University. She was a former senior policy advisor in the Obama administration, and she's a national recognized leader in early childhood policy and educational equity. And so this conversation, this webinar is very timely, and I will put on the chat a great article from the New York Times that talks exactly about where we're talking today. You know, early childhood and Head Start it's the foundation, as Margarita shared, and it is super important that we have this program because it has helped so many of us, so many of our communities. And right now, the debates that are taking place under the president are very concerning. So this conversation comes timely. And so with that, I'm going to pass it to Dr. Becky Palacios to set the foundation of what we're going to talk today. Thank you, Becky.
Thank you so much, Montse and Margarita. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here with all of you today. And I would just, think of all of the wonderful strides that we've already made in early childhood education through my lifetime, through many lifetimes and careers of people who have been dedicated to the pursuit of the best practices in early childhood and for multilingual children. And so today I want to talk about, if you can look at the next slide, I'm going to talk about some important things that we know are at the forefront of early childhood education. We always begin with the knowledge that early family engagement is critical and crucial. And we're talking about prenatal care and once they're born, birth, through before they even step into school, whether that's at, centers that's, age 2, 3, 4, whatever age in formal public school settings or early Head Starts or whatever they may be, faith-based education programs, wherever they are around the country. But we know the research shows us clearly that early family engagement is very, very critical. And I think one of the pieces that we're missing right now is that many of our schools, we know public schools begin maybe at pre-K 3 or pre-K 4, depends on what region you are and what you call it. But we will be remiss if we don't begin those early education programs when those parents walk in with babies on their hips, coming into those places of learning. And already extending that learning opportunity to what they can do at home to prepare their families with the talk, the play, the discussions, the wonderful opportunities in everyday kind of learning. I published a book called Being Your Child's Most Important Teacher, and I believe that very strongly because the parents are that important teacher before they even step into any kind of center or school. We're already taking care of them and providing that base of early family engagement and learning that they need. So once they do, and once those parents are ready to go back to work or to school or whatever, definitely number two, access to high quality inclusive programs is an important solution for those families that do that. I've worked with families across the country. I do this every single day. You see 50 years of experience. So here I am, a viejita, and I'm still running around trying to cover all these bases for people to understand that we need to have these high quality inclusive programs across the country. As I've worked with parents who are in the migrant fields, they're logged in to my webinars while they're working. What amazing dedication and opportunities for those parents who can log in asynchronously or even live on webinars like this because they want to learn. So access to these high quality inclusive programs should be available in a multitude of ways. We know our parents work 1, 2, maybe even 3 jobs. So we have to meet them where they are with that family engagement, and also access for multiple changing hours for children as they work multiple jobs, to have these high quality inclusive programs with multilingual types of opportunities for children to continue their native or heritage language. And then number 3 are best practices in early literacy in the home and in schools or centers, especially for our dual language learners. So what I've hear from parents as I'm working with them, they're saying, ¿Cómo le puedo ayudar a mi hijo? How can I help my child? And that's what we want to do, is provide these strategies, activities, opportunities to extend that learning out to families, because all we know now the science of reading and how important it is. But what I've also learned from parents is they don't know what it is. And I want to know, why is this such a secret? Why do parents not know what those important building blocks to learning at home are? And we need to provide those for them. So that's another important as a year theme, a year-long type of training that we can do for parents, provide them that family engagement, that outreach, to help them understand how you help with oral language, phonemic awareness, with phonics and fluency comprehension, and all the opportunities that they need to have to learn how they can provide that at home in a really meaningful way. And I tell parents, your kitchen is a science laboratory. There you have language and science and math and following directions in ingredients and how you process things step by step, even making a bed. Step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. They're going to need those steps to writing a story or solving a problem in math or science. So if we can provide them these bridges to understanding what they do at home is a bridge to what they're going to need for academic learning. They're already providing that base there. And the more that we can do that, the more that we can provide these practices to be successful students later on. One resource I want to mention that's absolutely amazing, that's free, is Colorín Colorado, and it's in English and it's in Spanish. You could toggle it over. There are tip sheets in multiple languages for educators, but there is a parent section that has books and research information. Anything you want to know is there, available in www.colorincolorado.org. So please share that widely with anyone that you know. That really iterates the importance of providing multicultural and dual language education to children so that they can succeed in their native language and also in their second language. So definitely want to provide this important foundation, as Margarita mentioned, on important advocacy and attributes that need to happen from us as educators. In the next slide, I do want to underscore how early childhood programs better support bilingual and multilingual children while honoring their language, culture, and identity. And this is aimed at what we can do to provide these important solutions. We already know professional development is critical, but we also know that the funds for those have quickly diminished. So we need to become much more advocates for creating pathways to professional development, because we know that's what's going to bridge the need for understanding, especially now that we know people like me who have retired and moved out of the workforce, all those years of experience. We have a lot of novice teachers that need that professional development and need that support from us. So the more that we can continue to do that, the more important pathways and strides we can make in that. Of course, included in that are engaging lessons and activities that support the first and second language as children are learning, maybe even the third, in our dual language programs. That is important for them to know, as well as the research that goes with it. Authentic resources that are available for parents and children and educators in the schools. I know when I started back in the 70s, we had to make our own books. We had to make our own resources because they weren't to be had. Now there are so many beautiful books in our free public libraries that parents can access, that are in our school libraries, that the teachers can use to, again, open up those authentic resources in the children's languages to be able to see themselves and see others in the world and how they learn. And also, again, I can't say enough about family engagement and how important that is in honoring our children and our families as they come and break down barriers in our schools. Many of our parents don't know all of the ins and outs of schools and school systems, that we can provide that bridge that helps them to do that. And again, one of my mottos as a pre-K teacher was and still is, you never get a second chance to make a good first impression. And many times when they come into our pre-K and early learning programs, they haven't been to school in a while until they come into this first time opportunity. And that's how we bring them in. And that's how we grow our own. And that's how we provide them with that proper Robert's Rules of Order, how to become a leader in the school, how to provide opportunities for them to engage in the school, not just, from wherever they are when they can, but are they welcome in the school? We have to provide that. So again, that's in providing community resources, what's in the community that can help bridge language and language development. I always tell parents that there are 4 E's that help in my book that help them understand what they need to do at home. And these are experiences, they're expressions, the talk, explanations, and the extras. And the extras are those community resources where you take them to the zoo or to the museum or to a farmer's market or to a play or to a dance of multicultural sorts where the children are learning other vocabulary other than they see the home. So those extras take them from the immediate type of environment out to the real world. So those community resources become critical in the way that they learn about, for example, sports. There's different kinds of sports. Maybe they all use a ball, but the rules are different. The names of the things are different. The opportunities to learn are different. And that's how we expand children's world and their language and their culture and their identity in what is in their community. So again, not only going out, but bringing the community in for parents that need that. What is in that community engagement? What is there? One of our biggest family engagement opportunities to help the children learn at home was for parents that wanted to learn English. We always had a wait list of parents that wanted to come to school to learn. So definitely opening up that community engagement, bringing the necessary resources in so parents can become engaged in what we're doing, because it's going to benefit their children. The more opportunities that they have, the more enriching that's going to be. As us as educators, it's important for us to be those bridges, those important connections to what the children are going to need. In the last slide, I want to underscore what we can do. We want to begin again with early language development, whatever language or multiple languages, concentrating on those early literacy skills and family connections. Again, birth through age 4 before a child even enters formal school settings. Now, if they're going to come to early learning centers, great, because then we continue that professional development and work to build these skills that are important in multiple ways of social, emotional learning, building friendships, building our identities, which are critical in this time. And then we're going to do this through school outreach and family engagement meetings so that parents become those high contributors in our schools, in our settings, so that we can, again, expand early childhood programs to make them fully strengthened by not only professional development and the work that we do as educators, but making that connection and collaboration with our families. So I'm available on chat. If you have any questions to add, I want to pass it on to the next one. Thank you, Monse.
Thank you so much, Becky. I love you gave us so much to think through, but also, the importance of early childhood and the importance of building that strong foundation with parents, educators, and with the students. Okay, we have a lot to cover. Now we have Dr. Santel Meek. She will talk about the current challenges and that are taking place right now. So go ahead.
Thank you, Montserrat. And happy to be here with you all, even under the circumstances. We can get started if we go to the next slide. So before we jump into this, I just wanted a quick kind of landscape of early care and education systems and the new challenges and the longstanding challenges that we've seen. I think one of the first things to understand is as we've already talked about, right, and doesn't need more emphasis, but I'll share anyway, there is a robust set of research that finds that access to high quality early care and learning opportunities in the early years is associated with a bunch of short, middle, and long-term outcomes, especially for our young multilingual learners and dual language learners. At the same time, we've had evidence for as long as I can remember that there are major challenges within the sector having to do with unequal access to early learning opportunities, having to do with a very uneven quality landscape of early care and education, having to do with equity and inequitable distribution of opportunity, and having to do with a workforce that is overworked and undersupported and underpaid. And all of these different pieces. And so those issues have been longstanding issues, really driven by policy and by underfunding of the system overall. And of course, today we're facing a whole new set of challenges, some of which we talked about already earlier in the presentation. So I'm going to circle back to that, but I think just to start, right, of course, this group does not even need this slide because we know the many, many benefits of bilingualism and multilingualism, especially in the early years and the long-term outcomes that can produce, right? I often joke with folks like, okay, pick your outcome of interest because there's research on it related to early bilingualism. You care about earnings, you care about employment, you care about education, brain science, right? There's just such a very robust research agenda and findings that we have that it's really a no-brainer here. So if we go to the next slide, there's also a lot of research on what quality means for young dual language learners or multilingual learners, right? And one of the big pieces that we work on and we emphasize a lot at the Children's Equity Project at ASU is actually getting really concrete and promoting dual language instruction, dual language education, dual language learning opportunities within early care and education settings. And so we've done a whole body of work on that. And if we go to the next slide, we know that there is a whole lot of research also specifically looking at access to dual language education where kids are receiving instruction and learning opportunities in their home language alongside English, right? All of these pieces here, I don't have to read them all, but becoming proficient in English more quickly, outperforming their peers in math and reading as they get older and progress through elementary and middle school, reaching academic norms faster, and so on. So if we go to the next slide, because of this evidence, in 2023, the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine published a consensus report, where they reviewed the whole universe of evidence on opportunity gaps. What is causing opportunity gaps? What is driving opportunity gaps? How do we bridge opportunity gaps for a bunch of different types of kids and groups of children who have been historically marginalized, including dual language learners, including immigrant students, including Latino and Asian and other groups of students. And so within that report, there were a set of recommendations that really talked about what are the different facets that need to be incorporated into early care and education systems to ensure that they are actually quality for all kids, right? Because what is quality for one kid isn't necessarily quality for everybody. And so part of that included, right, access to home language development, to bilingual learning, to dual language education, and pieces like that, alongside the rest of the pieces that we know are really important. So if you go to the next slide, this is the most timely piece, right? We know that across early care and education, by far, it's not even a contest, the most robust set of early learning standards for dual language learners are the Head Start program performance standards. They address all sorts of things across the whole law and across the standards that include everything from language instruction, including requirements to focus primarily on home language development for infants and toddlers and bilingual language exposure for preschool age students. The requirement to have a staff member who speaks the same language of the kids if more than half of the kids in the program speak a non-English language. Assessment requirements to ensure that we're actually assessing what kids know and understand across all of their languages, whatever those are. Family partnerships and language access for families, workforce competencies that require the teachers to actually, understand dual language development, understand what these kids need, and how to provide the best and optimal instruction for them. And so if we compare other sets of standards that we have, so for example, state childcare licensing is another set of standards that every state has. They include almost none of this, right? State pre-K standards. So there's a lot of public pre-K programs that are run by states. They might include some of this. It's very patchwork across the country. Some don't include any of it. Some include a little bit of it. But Head Start is kind of the one place where it's widely scaled, offered in every zip code across the United States, and has this one kind of unified set of robust standards. So if we go to the next slide. We also know that these standards are not new. A lot of them have been around since very, very early days of Head Start. For example, the requirement to have a bilingual staff person has been around since the very first regulation on Head Start in the 70s. So this is not something new. This is not something ideological. This is something that has been a consistent part of Head Start since the beginning. Let's go to the next slide. But of course, today we are seeing some policy proposals or potential policy proposals that are seeking to potentially water down, undo a lot of the Head Start program performance standards. And from what we're hearing, a lot of that attention is going to go to emphasizing this English only ideological agenda and getting rid of the stuff within the standard. Again, potentially it hasn't come out. It's what's expected. That require this dual language education, language access for families, all of these other things that exist in the standards that I just mentioned, right? And of course, this is in line with other policies that have been, engaged in over the last year and a half or so. And so if we go to the next slide. The Children's Equity Project, just yesterday, actually, we published a new report that really tries to compare, right? If the new policy proposal is going to be to kind of wave off a lot of these standards and instead adopt state childcare licensing, what does that actually mean? What does it mean for language access for families? What does it mean for the quality of instruction and early education that kids are getting? What does it mean for all of these pieces? And so we look at everything from ratios, which there's a giant gap between what Head Start has and what state childcare licensing has. We look at workforce requirements, we look at language access and dual language instruction. We look at emotional safety and suspension and expulsion. We looked at services for children with disabilities and so on and so forth. And then kind of within each of those, saying these are not the same, these are not interchangeable. And dual language learners, immigrant children, Latino children, Asian children, other children of color are going to see the worst consequences and be disproportionately impacted because so many of those civil rights protections, so many of those requirements do live within the standards. And so at this point, I think the field is just waiting in anticipation for what the proposed regulation is going to say. And just, of course, when there is a proposed regulation, the federal government is required to receive and open up public comment from the public. And so That is, I think, the really big piece that is just exacerbating all of these other major issues that we've had within early care and education. So with that somber note, I will pass it to the next.
Thank you, Chantel. We also put all the different links in the chat of all the great reports that you shared as well, and the importance of sharing them as well, because these are gold in these times of so much uncertainty. You have great resources that are available. I know at the state level, every state is very different the way that they run things, but I think this is the time where we know the craziness that's happening at the federal level. We can really make sure that we provide people on the ground with those resources that are very unique and that you can actually are able to leverage and help your community. So thank you for that. Next, we have Dr. Cristina Gonzalez with Abriendo Puertas. And go ahead, Cristina.
Thank you. Thank you, Montserrat. I'm really happy actually with like the flow. I really loved hearing like the context that was shared at the beginning, and also Dr. Palacios sharing like the practice of it to like the challenges that we have of like what the policy looks like right now. And ideally, our system should be flowing, right? That we should be engaging with our practitioners, with our families, and making sure that the systems are working for them. So I'd like to talk a little bit more about the context and what that context means and how we shift that narrative, and how shifting the narrative is also a best practice that we all get to be part of. Can we go to the next slide, please? So one of the things that we do at Abriendo Puertas, we have our National Latino Family Report, and we have some early childhood policy attitudes, and some of them this year we saw some shifts, but we also saw some consistent trends that have come across different years. And 97% of Latino respondents agree that Congress and the president should address access to affordable childcare, childhood education and learning. And we also see how there's like a differentiated approach to where families receive services from. And I think this also addresses like the need that Dr. Chantel was talking about. We actually need to improve the bar and close the gaps that exist instead of lowering those bars. So we look at 33% of the respondents are receiving services for their children in public centers. 32% prefer to have them stay with their grandparents. So how do we also upskill the families that are also being part of the system? We have mothers and fathers only, with like 26% offering the care for children, and 23% of families receive services from privately owned centers. 16% resort to other family members, 16% to informal childcare, 15% to registered home care providers, and 5% to older siblings, right? And I think like for older siblings, there's a broader conversation there too of like the safety networks that we are creating. And this is also important as we understand the rest of the context. If we can go to the next slide. So part of the emerging trends, we also see that the fear is growing among our community due to different policies. So part of understanding effective policies is that they're also linked and rooted within other contexts and other policies that impact our community, that impact our families and our children. 35% reported that they might consider avoiding taking their children to school if they hear about ICE in the area. So that also diminishes like the impact that investment in dual language programs might have, right? So what does it mean to actually have advocacy, not just for DLL, but also to create the context where it can exist and it can be impactful. 18% of parents reported that they may consider avoiding signing up their children for school or early childhood development programs, which would directly impact the sustainability of the programs that we currently have. And 16% of parents reported that they may consider avoiding talking to school officials or teachers. And Dr. Palacios did mention the importance of parent engagement. She mentioned the importance of having, like the staff and the practitioners in the know of what's happening with the families as well. So when we look at that, we see a direct correlation also to how we're going to measure the impact of some of these other policies that we're talking about. And when we look at the shifting priorities for families, sometimes we notice that they're shifting not because they don't think education is important, but they seem to shift out of survival mode. So in 2025, we did have 12% selected that they wanted to improve education as one of the top issues Congress and the president should address. In 2026, we did see a drop. And then we saw that it dropped to 9% as a federal policy priority. And immigration reform rose to 42%, which is new for this year. It was not a consistent trend in the previous years. Jobs in the economy were 38%, cost of living 37%, housing was 25%, and healthcare was 20%. And the reason why I think this is important is because in early childhood, I believe we have the most seasoned people and experts for holistic learning. So when we look at holistic learning and we see that our communities are prioritizing livelihood and survival, and that also impacts the learning that we're going to see for our children. One of the examples that I like to share with people, I was unhoused as a child. I experienced food insecurity. I was embarrassed sometimes to talk in class because my stomach was growling. So when we look at the social emotional aspects of that and how that will also impact the practice of our workforce, then it does call not just the practitioners, not just policymakers and not parents. It calls us as a community to see the intersectionalities between the challenges and to understand that when we live in fear, then our children don't get to be who they are. And part of who they are is how they express themselves, how they come and speak to it, right? So bilingual education and multilingual programs actually strengthen our communities, teach our children like that it's okay to be who you are and to take a step forward. And it actually is a healing component of our education system as well. And we can see that that's consistent across the different data that we see for the National Latino Family Report. 73% of Latino parents prefer that their children learn to read both English and Spanish. And then we can also see that there are structural barriers, which were mentioned by Dr. Margarita earlier, which are the proximity, the availability, and the affordability. And the affordability goes back into the connection of economic security. So how do we link those policies also that will make the initiatives for language learning sustainable long term? 39% currently attend a bilingual immersion or dual language program out of those who participated in our report. But we see that 73% want it. So there's a gap that we haven't been able to close. If we move on to the next slide, please. Part of the identity that I mentioned in like closing the gap and that I believe is a good practice is there's this quote in Spanish, el que no sabe de dónde viene, no sabe dónde va. That person who doesn't know where they're coming from, they don't know where they're going. And that's a good practice at home to really like express ourselves, speak our language, speak our culture, like who we are, so that we can reflect, so that we can think, so that we can engage. But the best way to model it is also by doing, right? So how do we move to shifting the narrative? How do we move like from talking about what we need to do for these programs to be effective, but also how do we move into action? And how do we highlight and amplify the practice and implementation? A good policy that is effective in the field is one that has a practitioner that's informed the implementation plan. Usually policy doesn't do really well in the field because they've never talked to or co-created with practitioners or with family members. So one of the resources that we do offer at APOD is one of our workshops, which is building community power through family engagement, storytelling, and action, because we get to learn about the experiences. We get to know about some of those fears that come forward and how to also address those fears when it comes to language, right? Some people will tell us, well, I thought that my child would be better off not speaking Spanish. If they focus on English, like they won't pick on them, they won't become a target, our family won't become a target, right? And that might happen in some of like the disclosures when they develop that trust. But then like we also see that when they talk to a community and they talk about like how they yearn to have their children speak Spanish, then they also become empowered, but they're becoming empowered by their own stories, by their own expertise, by their own action. And that's also a good practice to amplify the expertise of the families, what they know about their children and how they bring it and share it with the workforce. And then there's also expertise in the workforce, right? Children spend 2/3 of their life at home and 1/3 at school. Those are the people that actually create the bridges and all the connecting points that elevate the learning of children. So in order to elevate the policies that actually have direct impact, we have to talk to the people that are doing that, that are building that bridge. Another thing that I'd like to offer is for all of you to access the National Latino Family Report. It's also a braid of information where you see the co-creation process, where there's data and lived experience, there's narratives from the family, so that you don't only look at the data, but you actually look at how it actually impacts families on the ground. Our policy agenda is informed by family voices, what they share, what they want, but also by the facilitator network that captures the real context of what's happening on the ground for field educators. And a lot of the educators in early childhood are also parents in early childhood. And that's why they have that passion for education and for dual language programs. So in order to amplify different policies, we have to start thinking about the systems and how they flow. Part of my research, I do a lot of qualitative research, and I've interviewed educators, early childhood educators. One of the things that really surprised me is that almost every single educator that I interviewed, they were bilingual. And they shared that one of the reasons why they went into early childhood education is because they couldn't access their language when they were going through the programs. And they felt a real need to be that person for the children that were coming after them. And part of their practice is their expertise, right? They bring that storytelling and that knowledge to bring it to the classroom and amplify also the expertise of their children and what the children need. So also like part of the pedagogical approach should be to hear children's voices. Like it doesn't matter if, like they're 3, 4, 5, they have an experience. And then we also gather observational data from children who, are 0 to 3. So gathering that experience, that observational data is also a good practice to be able to feed back to the system that we are creating and to create a differentiated approach across the board. If we look at different states, for example, we have rural areas and we have urban areas. Here in California, I was talking to families from the Central Valley, and they told me, well, sometimes I don't engage because it feels like some of the policies are being written out for the big cities. I do not live in a big city. I live in a rural area, right? So even taking that into account of the lived experience, that it's not going to be a one size fits all, but rather a conversation that we bring and that the differentiation becomes part of those systems in the same way that it becomes part of the classroom when we have kids who are on the spectrum, who have kids who have speech delay, and like the practices that we incorporate with the learning of languages at the same time. So our approaches should be continuous. We should address that change is bound to happen. We should attempt to create and recreate these systems, and we also should monitor the individual progress of our children, of our families, of our workforce, of our decision makers, the alignment that we're bringing together as a system, and then how we engage in that collective learning. If we don't find alignment, it's really hard to buy into the collective learning and then build a system together. And that takes emotional intelligence, right? So we need to take our decision makers, we need to take our community through that system that we engage in early childhood, because some of these solutions are already there in the practice in the classroom, and we engage in coming up with these notions, right? Putting it into practice, looking at the way that it looks in the experience, reflecting on it, and then recreating the system. So it's an invitation to create more systems that flow to really amplify the impact of our multilingual learning programs. Thank you.
Thank you, Cristina. All the information has been very useful, and we see that the chat for some reason is not working. We've been putting all the different links, but don't you worry. We're going to follow up with the links, the recording, and also a survey. So don't you worry. You will have all these wonderful links. We thought we were very well prepared, but technology. So we have some questions if you want to put them in the chat, but there is a question. Oops, right here. Let me look at it. It says from Karen, she says, there are so many critical points for supporting the workforce, but are there any panelists communicating these needs to all the teacher education professors? I am working with NAECTE on this issue. How can we make demands on teachers if we don't also address them to the faculty who we're preparing them and their bosses? Yes, I don't know if anybody is able to talk about this, the connection and the importance of working in collaboration with universities and higher education to make sure that they know that these changes are happening. Anybody wants to answer that question?
I can try to address part of it. So I was also part of a panel. Well, I attended and heard the a couple of programs talking about how they prepare students, and then I heard like students in the field. There was a second panel right after, and there was definitely a gap in understanding like the frameworks, right? A lot of it is theoretical, in the way that students explained it, where in when you're learning about it, you're learning about like the best ways in which students should be learning, but you don't learn how to address the real needs that happen on the ground, when parents are in crisis mode or when something is happening in the classroom that's related to social emotional needs. But then there's also, I think, a disconnect where educators, I teach in the master's program for teachers, and some of the teachers will tell me like, I don't see myself as an advocate, I don't really have a voice in this, I don't have. So there's two things I think that we need to address. Part is a framework of how we implement in the field, and we need more field work to address some of the challenges that happen in early childhood education, and looking at more of like a holistic system, and really understanding too that like there's like a pay gap. There's a lot of challenges that also come for the workforce, so it's looking at the challenges that come for the child, for the family, and the practitioner, because when the practitioner also has things that are challenging their presence in the classroom, that also makes it more difficult to gather that observational data of how you're going to have impact on like helping a family that needs housing or anything like that. But with that, it's like the resources. How do we advocate for those resources? Because the onus comes, like the pressure comes on the practitioner because they're there immediately, and the parent comes to that person, right? And then I think sometimes like some of these professors also need to come into the field. I work in schools. I used to work in schools, so for me, it's like a direct connection of like knowing these were the challenges that I was experiencing. It was really difficult for me, and it took an emotional toll, especially during COVID, where like parents' needs were exacerbated, my own needs were exacerbated, right? So then how do I marry the two? And I think the other part is like in the classrooms, we need to talk about how policy works in learning environments, because educators are also policymakers, parents are also policymakers, and when we reach that understanding, then we're going to be able to put more pressure on the systems that are not working, but also have that conversation and co-create with higher education systems. But I don't think that, for example, like anyone going through a program as a student, I've been a student too. I am very open when the program is not working for me. I talk about some of the gaps that I notice. So if I can't advocate in a higher education program, that is a gap. And that's why I'm saying like dialogue is important. And that's why we need to model what it's like for to have self-advocacy, to have advocacy for the field, and to have advocacy for the system that we're creating. And I think one of those things is like what's happening here, like these conversations, we don't normally have conversations about how we were prepared, right? Because we're not looking at the system. So I think like it's like the critical thinking and the systems thinking that we need to merge into the work that we do, and understanding that for sustainability, I need to start building that system when I'm learning about the system that I'm engaging in, right? But you know, like I think that it's also like a reflection point for professors. Do I actually know what's going on in the field, or I'm just like, or am I stuck in a vacuum of research where I'm just like going with other academics, right? Like I really honor applied researchers because they come back to the field. They talk to the practitioner so then they can improve what's happening in the classroom, and then they can push their own programs to have quality education. So the same quality that we're demanding for early childhood, we have to be able to advocate for it on the higher education front, because if they're not meeting the need, then why are we engaging with the education programs? And I say that because that's part of the continuous learning, right? Like I'm a lifelong learner. So I also look at my classrooms and the way that I model whatever's happening in the classroom, I have to update. Some professors usually are still using data like from the 1990s. I saw someone use something from like the 1990s as an example, and then the students couldn't engage with it. So then that means something is wrong with the way that I teach, right? And the way that I learn, and I need to call it out. So I think that's something for me, a good practice is to call out other people in the field and to call myself out. And that's just like the starting point.
Yeah, no, thank you, Cristina. And I appreciate you sharing the importance of also understanding that we're not just one person, right? And the importance of organizing and working in collaboration with different stakeholders, right? Every one of us has a different role, whether you're a mother, whether you're a professor, whether you're an organizer, whether you're a student. We all can help each other and create a bigger force when we connect with each other, and when we know how do we advocate at a different level. So thank you so much for that. We have a question here, and I know like we're short on time, but one of the questions here is, please address the impact of assaults on immigrants on family engagement, especially in these times, right? That we feel so many times that we don't have a voice, that parents don't have a voice. But I always remind our parents who might be undocumented, right, that their children are U.S. citizens, and they are part of this community, and we need to make sure that we work with other people to ensure that we are supporting them. But if somebody would like to talk about the impact of the assaults that are happening as well, and in early childhood even more, right? I don't know if any one of you would like to take that question.
Well, I've been working with families in the field and, in the last 10 years. And what I've seen is a decrease in the family engagement in the live sessions and the fear of sending your child to school. So there's twofold. It's not only do the parents not want to engage with school, it's they don't want to send their kids either. And so the enrollment drops and they keep them at home, especially in those early childhood years when it's so critical. And they're with, not to diminish this since I'm an abuelita, but they stay home with abuelita, they stay home, somebody, a caregiver, whatever, that takes care of them, and do not go to a formal school setting or Head Start or whatever they would be eligible for. So the fear is there, and I see a decrease in participation across the country. I had a place I was going to. I won't name which one, but they called me. It was scheduled for 6 months out in advance, and they called me and said, we are going to cancel it because we did a survey and the parents said we're not coming. And so we tried it again a few months later, and out of the 50 parents that were going to come, we had like 2. So definitely, I've seen a decrease across the country, but parents do connect. Like I mentioned earlier, they do connect via technology, links, from wherever they are, and are glad to do so. And so they voice that to me. So we can see the impact also of enrollment, lack of enrollment in our centers, our schools, our Head Starts, and so forth. So that's the impact that I see.
Yeah, no, for sure. Let me see. I see. Thank you for sharing. We have Terry said, could you provide the source about Head Start requiring a bilingual teacher in the classroom if 50% of the students speak a language other than English? I think
Yes. I put it in the chat, but I will put it in the chat. It's on the Head Start webpage that has all of the standards. And then I also put separately the link, I'll do that now again, to the 1975 standards that included the same language from back in the day.
Yeah, and to your point, Chantel, this is something that, again, right, we're waiting for this, whatever announcement the Trump administration is going to do in regards of Head Start. This is a great opportunity for our community, and I call the 100+ people that are in this webinar to understand what is going to be taking place, and also for you to embody the fact that you have a voice. And that you are able to advocate for your community the best way that you know how. And it is by sharing how, for instance, waiting for this, how Head Start has been so helpful for so many of us, right? And how these guidelines, even though they were at the national level, it is really up to each state to embrace them, right? And this is something that happened with the Office of English Language Acquisition. We have the Dear Colleague letter being rescinded. However, it was rescinded. It was a guideline. It is up to each state and stakeholders to really make sure that our community receives the resources that they need in the way that they need them. And so this is a call to action for everyone that is in the call, to really keep an eye, to ensure, to see what is happening with these guidelines that they're about to release. But it's also an opportunity for us to understand that we have roles and responsibilities, and that one of our responsibilities is to advocate for the future of our country, our young children. And so this is an opportunity to do that. I don't see.
Can I add one thing to that,
Yes,
Montserrat, please, just
yeah.
super quick? I think just to share one example of the importance of public comment. So I think this week, the Senate included some language in their Appropriations Committee that would pause this OMB regulation on kind of embedding political review in research and grant making and things like that at the federal level, after the administration received over 50,000 overwhelmingly negative public comments. And so perhaps it didn't change within the administration, but then Congress is taking it. So like just the sheer quantity of public comments that comes in, like that is something that actually matters. Whether or not the administration, right, takes this on and pauses it themselves, I think it matters. So I just wanted to point out that very recent and very important example. And I think with Head Start in particular, I think it's going to be really important for researchers and other folks to really this is going to be the opportunity, right? You can't be providing, say, research-based curriculum, research-based instruction for DLLs. That includes dual language education, right? You can't be building these partnerships that the law requires you to build if you're not provided language access. It's just not possible. So there are these pieces that are in law, and the law remains, right? That if you take down these other pieces, then you can't meet what the law says. And so I think there's a lot to unpack there as well.
Thank you. Yes, we ran out of time, but I'm going to pass it to President Margarita to close us out. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. I want to thank Montserrat. I want to thank Rebecca, Christina, Chantel for reminding us that the future of our children is really shaped by the choices we make today, right? Today's conversation, like they were just sharing, cannot end here, right? I think that if you leave with one message, is that we cannot allow them, like Chantel says, to lower the bar, right? Our youngest children cannot advocate for themselves, so we have to advocate for them. Public comment is critical. It will be open. And like Chantel said, please go in. It could make a difference. You know, we always say that que cada granito de arena cuenta. Every single, grain of sand counts, right? You don't know how you're making a difference, but your story and your voice, like Montserrat says, counts. Cristina mentioned something that was really critical. Let's improve the VAR and close the gap, and that we can all do together. And I want to end with what Rebecca said, right? That early family engagement is critical. It's at the core. Let's find ways to support our families in the process porque son esenciales. We couldn't do this without this. So let's organize, let's act. We're all advocates. Every single one of our stories is critical, and we all need to come together to support. And here at NABE, we really are committed to standing beside each one of you, each educator, family member, research, community leader, policymaker. We're here to support you and to amplify your voices, to advocate for equitable practices and strengthen bilingual education, dual language education, and early childhood education, and to ensure that every bilingual, multilingual child has access to high quality early childhood education. And this is the time to act right now. I invite you to go to the NABE advocacy page. We have tons of resources there. There was a question, how do I become an advocate? What are resources that I can send parents for advocacy? Please go to our NABE website. I'm going to ask our colegas here to please put the link. We have tons of resources, but also you can reach out to any one of the panelists here. You can reach out to NABE and we will find ways to help you. Lastly, I want to invite you to continue this conversation and engage with us. We have a Join NABE Cal Center for Applied Linguistics co-sponsor webinar where we're going to continue to talk about these critical conversations during these times that are so difficult for many of us, but also, provide practical tools for educators and advocates. So I invite you to come to that webinar. You'll see the information here. I've also asked you to please join us. We're going to have a Leadership Institute in Hawaii, spring 2027, for school leaders, for superintendents from across the United States. We're going to be sending you that information. We're going to come together to learn, to collaborate, and to continue to lead. And please mark your calendars. 2027 in February 10th to the 13th, we have our conference in Florida. And we hope that you can come. It's actually the 17th to the 19th. I said the wrong date. Please, we would love to have you there so we can continue this conversation. Together, we can really ensure that every child is seen, every language is valued, and every family is supported, and every educator has the resources to succeed. Muchísimas gracias for standing with all our students, all our communities. Muchísimas gracias to our colegas that were here, our experts that were here, and muchísimas gracias to all of you for being here. Please continue to work together. Thank you for standing with NABE and with each one of us, for standing for their children, and thank you for helping us build a future where opportunity begins in early childhood for every child, every family, and every community. Have a wonderful afternoon, and muchísimas gracias.